Hello, and welcome to the Cycle Endometriosis podcast, where we will delve deep into experiences, challenges, and triumphs of those navigating a life with endometriosis. Join us as we share the stories of resilience, offer insights from experts, and foster a community of support for those affected by this often misunderstood condition. Whether you're newly diagnosed, a seasoned warrior, or seeking understanding, I hope this podcast is here to help empower you and uplift you on your journey. Tune in as we break the silence, shatter stigmas, and amplify the voices of the endometriosis community. Medical disclaimer: this podcast is not intended for the purpose of providing medical advice. All information, content, and material of this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to serve as a substitute for the consultation, diagnosis, and/or medical treatment of a qualified physician or healthcare provider. Thank you so much for being here, and now on to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's episode of the Cycle Podcast. So grateful to have you here today. I have my guest, Nicole, with me today, and very excited to get to know each other. We've known each other through other people, so excited to chat with you today, Nicole, on the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So excited to chat more. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into the show?
Sure. So my name's Nicole. I live in New Jersey, which is great for having access to endometriosis doctors that know what they're doing. So I have endometriosis, obviously. I was diagnosed 2 years ago, coming up my 2-year anniversary. And since then have really dived into the world of endo and the community. I didn't really have much of a community going through getting to a diagnosis, just because there's also that component of feeling like a fraud until you're actually diagnosed. I was lucky that I knew the word pretty early in my journey, so I was able to do my own research and was pretty sure I had endo, but never really wanted to dive deep into the community and different support groups because I didn't know for sure that I had it. So since then, I've really dove into that, working with different foundations, and part of the missing puzzle piece I found was that everybody preaches that excision is the gold standard, because it is, but it's also really expensive and really inaccessible for most women. And that was the missing puzzle piece with all these other foundations, is they are so phenomenal for research and for a bunch of other different aspects. But I couldn't find anybody else helping women pay for excision surgery. So I'm like, all right, let's fill in that puzzle piece, and started my foundation, Endo Excision For All, almost a year ago. It hasn't even been a year yet, which is so crazy.
It's incredible what you've done in less than a year.
Thank you.
Really, really incredible. Yeah. So Endo Excision For All, we're going to talk more about that in the show. I want to dive into that and what you do and how it started and all of that. But let's hear a little bit about your story and how, you said you got diagnosed 2 years ago, but I have a gut feeling, haha, no pun intended, that you started having some symptoms earlier than 2 years ago. So when did things start to feel off for you, or did you not have anything feel off? When was your first kind of sign that something might be going on?
So perfect segue with your little pun there, because it all started in the gut with stomach issues. So even before I started getting my periods, because I started getting my period at 11 years old, which is pretty early for young girls, but common with endometriosis. It all started with the gut. So I could never do a full sleepover at a friend's house as a kid, in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, all those ages. Because I was constantly getting up in the middle of the night with a stomach ache. And everybody was just like, oh, you're nervous. It's because you're nervous. You're at somebody else's house and you're not comfortable. I'm like, well, no, this happens at home too. But
Right.
people just ignore that part. Doctors ignore that part and just focused on the anxiety component. So I was always treated for anxiety. And obviously there was anxiety, have a stomach ache all the time, and you're scared to go places, but that wasn't the root issue.
Yeah.
And then
I get that, because that still happens to me today sometimes, where I have anxiety and people are like I don't want to be trapped in a plane for too long or something, where I'm not close to the restroom. It is, the anxiety is coming from the stomach, not
Yeah,
the other way around. It's all connected, but yes, I
exactly.
totally understand that. Okay. So young age, you're nervous about staying at people sleepovers and things like that. Then what kind of was going on with you?
Then got my period, and that was very uncomfortable. But nothing that was out of the norm, and what I was told. It was painful. Took Tylenol, still felt pain, but just laid up in bed and dealt with it. And was told, this is part of being a woman. Welcome to the club, and this is you're gonna have to deal with this the rest of your life, or until menopause. Um, and then around 16 years old is when it became like really debilitating. I was missing school. I My diet became extremely limited. So then like the conversations with my doctors became eating disorders. And I'm like, I'm not eating because I'm trying to lose weight or trying to restrict my eating. All these foods are making my stomach hurt. So if I have to go to school, I'm not going to eat breakfast. I'm going to skip breakfast because no matter what I eat, I'm not going to feel well. And then I get sent home from school. So my solution was, okay, doctors aren't helping me. I'll just won't eat breakfast and try to get through the day without eating to get through school, and then eat at home where I'm comfortable and have my bathroom and cannot feel well, but at least get through classes. But again, like focusing on the wrong aspect and like misdiagnosis. And that just all the time spent on that with like nutritionists and things like that were pretty much a waste of time for me personally. Because that wasn't the issue. The issue was my stomach was hurting, so let's treat that. And my periods being bad. But I also always viewed, and this is something I didn't learn until after my surgery 2 years ago, was that endometriosis affects more than just your menstrual cycle. I thought the stomach component, and this is how my doctors were looking at it, like my primary care and my gastro and my gynecologist was, okay, you have painful periods, so dysmenorrhea, and we're just going to give you painkillers for that or birth control. And then your stomach issue is something different. So we'll like dive into that, do some tests, but ultimately you have IBS. And it
Yep.
wasn't until my surgery where I was told I had like 30 lesions just around my colon and then 20 around the rectum. And it's like, oh my God, this can grow in other areas. And I think I mentioned this before. I consider myself very lucky that I knew what endometriosis was. My mom was diagnosed with it when I was born via C-section. So at least I knew like the word, because once I started having issues, then my mom was able to say, I think you have endometriosis because I have it and it tends to run in families. So at least I knew what to look up and like questions to ask. I can't imagine how much longer it could have taken if I didn't have that.
Right. And the fact that you even had like a family history of it and these stomach issues, but the
Yes.
correlation still wasn't there. Like,
Yeah.
it's really interesting because very similar to you, like I had always had stomach issues, was eating very limited to the point where at one point it was like literally all I was eating was crackers and broth.
Me too.
And that, yeah, that's how I finally got to a diagnosis. Was I like did all these tests and was diagnosed with IBS. I was so frustrated. I was like, this is not IBS. And also very similar, had no clue that these things were related. I thought I didn't know what endo was. I thought I
Yeah.
just had a bad stomach and then bad periods. I had no clue it was related. And it's so important on the GI side. Like those doctors need to be educated too, because I feel like a lot of patients sometimes go right to the GI
Yeah.
doctor.
Yeah, that's something that, and I went to all these different, a similar story to most of us, went to all these different doctors. It wasn't like sticking with one primary care doctor or one gynecologist and one gastro. Like the list goes on, and none of them connected the dots on gastro and endometriosis.
Yeah. So, okay. So you're OB and now said, you have endo and then you're seeing GI doctor and you have IBS. What happened from there?
So yeah, so 16 is when it got like super debilitating. Diet was pretty much crackers and broth, like you said.
Mhm.
And just dealing with it. So I get my period. I knew, like my teachers knew, my job knew that if every 28 to 30 days, I'm not going to be available for 2 days minimum. Because then also like the PMS aspect. So then like the fear of like that pain hitting, then I would get like a little bit of cramping and be like, okay, is it going to be 2 days until I get my period? Or is it going to be 2 hours? So I need to stay home because the second it hits, I'm hitting the floor, I'm vomiting, I'm rushing to the bathroom, I'm passing out, like losing finger, like feeling in your fingers. The pressure in your legs, like you can't stand. And I'm like, this is not normal. But at least I knew it was probably endometriosis. And I remember being 16 on my parents' couch watching Dancing with the Stars, and I saw that Julianne Hough, um, which she was, dancing, doing her thing. But as that was on, I was Googling endometriosis, and I saw she had done an article, I forgot where, but talking about having it. And I'm like, there's no way that this girl has what I have, and she's on
Right.
Dancing with the Stars, like all the
Right.
every day, like they're training, and it's crazy. So like, there's no way, like she had help. I have to be able to find help. So then started diving deep into like research more, finding out that there's surgery that you can get done, asking my gynecologist about surgery. And again, where I feel like I got very, very lucky is that none of the gynecologists I went to wanted to operate on me. They said the risk was too high. Um, they just didn't want to do it. So in a way, I think that was really good because I didn't get an ablation surgery. I eventually waited. And even when I got my excision surgery, I didn't know to look for an excision specialist. I just happened to be in a location where there's a lot of excision specialists. So when I'm researching endometriosis surgeons, I'm getting the ads from these top specialists to do excision. But say I was in, I don't know, Tennessee.
Michigan.
And, yeah,
I'm in Michigan.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
you can be getting ads from gynecologists that are treating endometriosis with ablation surgery, because there's just not excision specialists in that area that are, promoting themselves to show up in your own research that you're doing. So
Why did the doctors say that they didn't want to operate on you? Was it because of your age, or was it because they knew you potentially had endometriosis and they knew that they didn't think that they could help you with it?
So two things. They never really brought up my age. I feel like that did have a part to do it because still like under 18, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But the main one being that they just said surgery has too high of complications, a risk of complications. So if I'm able to live with it, because I was managing to live with it, that is the better option to just take pain meds. The
Yeah.
other one being that they're like, we can do surgery, and they never said remove. I don't remember exactly what they said, but obviously it would have been ablation. And they said it would like come right back. And which obviously is known for ablation. And that there's nothing to really do for it anyway. They're like, we'll just go in, confirm it, do whatever they do, it comes right back, and then
Yeah.
there's nothing to, like, there's no cure. So it doesn't make sense in their head to do the surgery and have the risk of complications from surgery as a teenager. Um, just to be told you have endo when, my mom was technically surgically diagnosed. So at least we
That
didn't
is
know.
so fortunate. I mean, that is definitely very fortunate because a lot of people out there, the doctor would be like, let's do this exploratory
Yeah.
laparoscopy. Okay, so you're Googling around trying to find a doctor. You don't know what excision is, but because you're in such a great area, New York, New Jersey area, there's a lot of doctors. What happened?
I found someone, and this was, again, I was 16 at the time. I found like one of the top in New York. Um, and I just said, if I ever get surgery, because I got like freaked out from surgery then, right? So then in my head, I'm like, okay, I am dealing with this. I have my system. Every 2 days I'm out. That's okay. My teachers know, my job. I mean, I was just working at a restaurant. It wasn't anything crazy, but I'm like, I'll just deal with a real job, like, my corporate career, down the line, and hopefully can find better medication, better management at that point. But I didn't want to get surgery either. The gynecologist kind of freaked me out about that.
Yeah.
So then I found this guy, and I'm like, if I ever get surgery, this is who I'm going to. Um, and then, 10 years went by. I had surgery at 26. And that's because in that 10-year period, it just got so bad that it went from taking off of work or in school 2 days a week, or not 2 days a week, sorry, 2 days a month, to then getting the opportunity as I graduated college and got my corporate job, being able to work from home on the days I didn't feel well or had my period. So then I was able to like work from bed, and that worked. That I was able to manage that. But then even with that accessibility, I still was then taking off because it got so bad. I wasn't even in bed. I was on the bathroom floor.
Yeah.
Wasn't able to do client calls. And then it just went from 2 days to 3 days. And then daily stuff too. Like my stomach got so bad that I couldn't go on like a long like plane ride. Or
Mm-hmm.
I would, but I'd be in the bathroom most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So then I wouldn't want to.
Yeah.
Even any like a van, any long car ride, like people get freaked out or annoyed about traffic because they don't want to sit in it. I'm thinking like, where am I going to get a bathroom? And like every single aspect of life became, where's the bathroom?
Right.
Where's an accessibility point that I can get to a bathroom in a matter of 2 minutes,
Yeah.
or even less. And, eating around that, and even that, like little, I don't know what to call it, that little like, safety net I could use of just not eating if I was going to be in a car ride in the morning, then
Hmm.
that didn't matter because I would just wake up with an upset stomach. So then if I had to leave the house at 10 o'clock in the morning, I was still getting up at 6 a.m. because I had to allow myself 2 hours to not feel well, whether I ate or not. And it just became like, I cannot continue to live this way. And that's every day. Then the period aspect, it's like, I can't do this either. The pain was just so bad. Um, so then I need surgery every month that I got my period. I just be like, I cannot do this. I need to book a consult. Because then the other part of it too, which I think a lot of women with endo can relate to, is you get the really bad pain flare-ups, but then if you have a couple days where you're okay, you're like,
Hmm.
okay, maybe I was just being dramatic. I got this. I got through it. Surgery's scary. Maybe I don't need to do it. And then you have another flare up and you're like, get me into surgery now.
Yeah.
So I just had more of those episodes and it's like, I cannot do this anymore. So I made a consult with the doctor that I found 10 years prior. And it was very fast. I had my consult in February and I had surgery in May.
Wow. And during this like 10-year period, as you said, things were like progressing and you were getting worse. Did you know it was all related to endo at that point? Or were you
No.
just like, that you got so used to living that way? You had your systems,
Yeah,
right? That's
exactly.
what you said. You had your systems and that was just normal life to you at that point. You just adjusted to living that way.
Yeah, and I think the most interesting part of it to me now, like being post-op, is the way that all women talk about their symptoms because of what you just said, like how you get so used to it and you get like it becomes your life. So half the symptoms, like standard endo symptoms, you don't even think about because you're like, no, this is just part of my daily life. Or they're not as bad as you think they are because you get so accustomed to living your life that way. So when I went for my consult and I explained my symptoms to the surgeon, he was like, maybe we'll find like one or two lesions up against your colon and like that should help your stomach issues. And then there was 30 around the colon, 30 into the colon, and then 20 around the rectum. And I remember coming out of surgery and he's like, how did you live like this? Like, he was like, I was booked. I was the morning surgery for a 3 hour block. They thought I was going to be a quick in and out, home same day. And I ended up having 73 lesions throughout the whole pelvic area. So, and he's just like, I don't like, how did you live like this? I'm like, well, what was my other option? And it showed because like they didn't expect any of that based off of, well, one, the MRI being completely clean, and two, how I relayed my symptoms.
Yeah, I'm glad that you acknowledge that your MRI was clean because that does happen to a lot of patients and they feel discouraged if
Yeah.
they receive an MRI that says they don't have any disease. I had a partial bowel obstruction from endo that didn't show up on an MRI. My doctor also
Unbelievable.
not prepared to have to deal with that.
Yeah.
You mentioned symptoms, and we've talked about some of them, but I always love for people to explain if you can remember some of the symptoms because I think it really does help people who are listening who are questioning like where they are in their journey or if it's endo.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, nausea and stomach things, but what other symptoms were you experiencing before your surgery?
I was getting UTIs every 3 to 4 months. Like 4 times a year, 5 times a year was normal for me. Like the couple years leading up to surgery. So a lot of antibiotics, obviously not helping the gut issues. Um, but just not even associating that with endo. It's just okay, maybe I'm in a long-term relationship and I'm like, maybe there's something like sexually, I'm not getting up and peeing fast enough after sex. Because I was making sure because of that, I made sure like every time we're finished, I'm running to the bathroom to pee. And
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe I'm not fast enough, or maybe we need to drink more water. So I pee more after that. And like all these things in your head that I'm like, this doesn't add up. Like there has to be more going on here.
Yeah.
Probiotics. I was like trying different probiotics because I read something online. I don't know if it's true or not. This is just my head. Um, but something that like some probiotics can cause UTIs because of what it does with the bacteria. So I was like switching up probiotics. And then my gastro was like, what are you doing? You need to stay on one and like let that work. Like I'm getting all these UTIs and like I saw somewhere that this could be it. And it's just like fishing for answers online because doctors aren't really helping. And
Yeah.
but that was one of the biggest ones for me is and like in partnership with the period pain and the stomach issues were the UTIs. But also the other big difference for me was the fatigue that I didn't even because I still, at the in school time went to school and I still when I started working got up and went to work, but I just always felt like I was this like super lazy girl and I was like, oh, I don't want to do this, I want to do that. But then after surgery, I'm like getting up at 7:30 in the morning without an alarm and like having energy and feeling refreshed. And when I mentioned that to my doctor, he's like, well, yeah, you were loaded with inflammation in your body and we just got rid of it. Like, of course you're going to have
Yeah.
more energy. I'm like, I
Yeah.
never expected that either.
Right. Because again, you were so used to living with it from such a young age
Yeah.
that it was your new normal. Yeah, I completely understand that. I've had my new normals as well. And then once you're post surgery, you're, whoa, I
Yeah.
really feel different. Yeah. And okay, well, thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so you have your surgery and it was a big surgery, it sounds
Yeah.
like. And then what happened after that? How was your recovery? How are you feeling now?
It was interesting. So I think too, a lot of women that I've spoken to, like that are going into surgery, um, and yeah, obviously everybody asks like to each other, like, how was recovery? What to expect? And obviously it's different for everybody, but I always say I felt like I had a really bad flu. Like my body just felt like bleh. But I didn't feel pain. And I know a lot of women wake up from in recovery in pain, um, as just part of the recovery process. And I didn't feel any of that. I don't know if it was because I was on every painkiller possible and I was taking them. Um, I think that helped, but because of like how in depth the surgery was and how long it ended up taking. It did end up being 6.5 hours, so the anesthesia took a while to wear off. So I'm sure that also helped with the pain, compared to like a 3 hour if the surgery was 3 hours like it should have been or was intended to be. Um, but yeah, I was in the hospital for it was on a Friday. I got discharged from the hospital at like midnight on Sunday, and then was in a hotel room um, because I live in New Jersey and the hospital was in New York, and my doctor, because he was so scared of a bowel perforation,
Mhm.
wanted me on Manhattan, just
Yeah.
in case, so I could go straight to the hospital and he could take care of it. So I ended up there for like in a hotel from that Sunday night into the following Wednesday, I finally was able to get my clear of complications and go home.
Wow. Wow. And so you said that was 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years in
Or
May. But I do always, I know that the first period after surgery is known to be super painful, and the second one too. I personally, my periods before surgery were way worse than the recovery and the first two periods post-op.
I mean, it's just incredible how much removing the disease
Yes.
helps. It just makes such a big difference. So how are you doing now, or how have you been the past 2 years? How are things going?
Pretty okay. I I always had it in my head too that like excision, like it is the gold standard. So if you get that done, like you're good. And that's, not the case. I mean, for some women it is. But for myself and a lot of women I talk to, it's not. So I'm at that point now, because of how advanced it was and how much it was 73 lesions. He's like, it's not a matter of when or if your next surgery is going to occur, it's a matter of when. So I was told anywhere from like 2 years to 5 years, do some, hormone like birth control, estrogen to help stave it off. But I had bad mental side effects with that. So I ended up not taking that. And I didn't want
Mhm.
to try something else. I really, really wanted to try to stave off the regrowth naturally. And I did try that to the best of my ability. And it's definitely back. So now the second surgery and conversations of that with my doctor, um, trying to figure out when that will be. I'm leaning more towards doing another surgery and then starting another hormone medication to like shut down the ovulation. Um, just like, so it's like a cleanup versus suppressing the symptoms and then having another larger surgery down the line. I'd rather just have one sooner and just cross my fingers that it's more of a cleanup. But yeah, just still dealing with it. That was the biggest hurdle, I think, for me personally, was realizing that excision is the gold standard, but it doesn't mean it's gone forever.
Yeah, I understand that so deeply, you saying that, because I feel like in my head, every time I had a surgery, and I've had several, I knew it wasn't a cure. I know this is a chronic illness, right? But in my head, I still convinced myself that I was going to be golden after this and I was going to feel great. And I do feel so much better. I mean, there is no comparison, but there's still ups and downs with the disease. And I think that's very challenging mentally. I know it is for me because, like you said, you have these days where you feel really good and you're like, oh, I don't need to do anything. I'm totally fine. And then it could be literally hours later that you are on the floor and you're like, literally 8 hours ago, I was like running a marathon. Probably not really, but could have maybe ran a marathon.
Yeah.
And it's just such a challenge, and there's just not enough known about it as to why does that happen, or, you know, with the really severe disease, it's really challenging. And like you said, I know many patients who have had one excision surgery. I've interviewed one person on the podcast that had one ablation surgery, and they feel fantastic. And I love that. And that's great. It's just, it's so different for each one of us. It's so individual. And that's also a big challenge too, I think, in the medical space, because they don't understand it. They don't understand like why some people can have one surgery and be okay, and then other people can't, but it depends on the severity of the disease.
My favorite talking track, just because you mentioned it, I don't want to go like too off topic, but I just always love bringing it up, is how you mentioned like we could be totally fine, be having a good day, and then a couple hours later, an hour later, it's the opposite. And just having people who don't have endometriosis understand that, like people in our lives, understanding that just because you're okay in the morning doesn't mean you're flaky, because that changes and just how fast that can change. Because I'm sure you've had the same experience with canceling plans, and you know, the response is, well, I saw you're doing this, especially with social media now, like people posting things. I saw you did this yesterday. You're telling me you're not okay today.
Yeah.
Like, you just don't want to come. It's like, no, it's not. Like, that's not how it works.
All you want to do is go to that event. I've had those challenges with friends and even work, because I feel terrible if I have to cancel something for work. And I have a kind of a good example. Last week I had to have an ultrasound done. So I work from home too. And I had it done. And I was like, I'm going to treat myself to a protein smoothie from a place that I love, because, you know, I wanted to just give myself, and I had to come back and work the rest of the day. Right. This was like in the morning.
Yeah.
Got it. Drank half of it. Instantly, something just didn't agree. I felt lightheaded, dizzy, stomach pain. And I still like worked with my laptop in my bed. A lot of people don't see that behind the scenes stuff. Yeah. And it was instant. Like that morning, I felt great. I was in a great mood. My body felt strong and great. And then maybe it was like too much protein at once. I don't know. It could have been anything. And I just instantly felt sick and then it was there for the rest of the day. And it's so hard to explain that, you know?
Yeah. Especially just with social media and things like that, where everybody like putting your best life forward. I don't know, like everybody's posting about the good things. That's why I think it's so important with women with endo, especially or just women's health in general. If you're comfortable to share your issues and your problems and your day-to-day that doesn't look so beautiful and pretty, because it's relatable, and it shows people, ideally people who don't have endo will see it and realize like this is what goes on in the background. Like when you're working from home, and I can't tell you how many times I've had my computer and just had my camera off and had to like mute myself on and off, because I'm like presenting something with a colleague. So we're like taking turns. And then as my colleague's presenting, I mute myself and throw up. Like I'm literally taking this call from the bathroom floor, and then, you know, popping ibuprofen and painkillers, and, you know, then it's my turn and it's okay, and then mute, throw up. And it's like my company doesn't know. I'm not announcing that.
No.
But, you know, people don't people without endo need to, or without any chronic health condition, especially in women's health, need to kind of see that side and realize like there's more than like what our baseline effort has to be way higher than somebody without a chronic illness.
Yeah, I've seen those memes about like people with endo should get an Oscar
Yeah.
because I was having like a very similar to you. I was presenting to like a whole group of people last week for work and I was not feeling good at all. But on that call, I took every ounce of energy to like bring the energy. And then it's like afterwards, it's almost like you want to just lay on the floor. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I a little bit show over the past years have started to show behind the scenes, but I still get embarrassed and struggle with it. And then if I talk about this on the show and I need to just get over this, but I'll run into someone at the gym or on the street that follows me on social media and they'll just look at me and they'll be like, are you okay? And that's really hard for me because I obviously very much appreciate the empathy and the care and concern, but there's the other flip side where I don't want to be treated differently. So I really struggle. I just took down a post today that I had posted last week because I was embarrassed. And this is someone I have a podcast about. I've been dealing with this for 25 years. I still really struggle being vulnerable about it.
It's hard to let that side show, especially when people have the other perspective on it where they're like, oh, she's just looking for attention. She's just putting this out to get like sympathy. And it's like, that's what raising awareness is actually. It's bringing attention to a topic. And when it comes to health, you have to, part of that is patients sharing their story and being real about it because it's helping other patients. It's not just like looking for a sympathy card. It's no, this needs more attention. And the more we talk about it, the more that hopefully change will happen and more people will join that fight for change to happen with increased research and insurance and all those things. But yeah, it's really hard on both aspects with people coming for you and saying you're looking for attention, looking for a sympathy card. But then also being like so sympathetic that you're like, no, like I still, I do think like I'm not looking for the sympathy card. I just want to raise awareness.
Yes, it's a very delicate balance, and obviously I very much appreciate it. And what you're saying too about raising awareness, I have become such a more empathetic leader in my job, in my life, in my relationship because of this. So I'm sure you feel the same way. If someone says they have a migraine or they're not feeling well or they need a day off or they're just having a moment, I always believe them. I always trust them. And I would say earlier in my career, even though I had endo, I would be more skeptical. We are prone to be skeptical about people and we think they're being dramatic and making things up. And endo has really taught me that empathy and meeting people where they are and believing them. And sometimes maybe people are trying to get away with stuff at work and take a day off. That happens. But I would say 99% of the time, people really just are not feeling well and they need that space.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. Okay. So out of all of this, you were like, people do not have access to this type of care and they need it. And I've felt this for so long. And when I saw what you were doing and what you've done, and I want to talk about that, just so impressed. It's so needed. There's so many people that can't access surgery or care. I talk about this all the time. I don't even know how I would have survived without having access to care. I'm so lucky and I'm so grateful. So talk to us about Endo Excision For All. Where did this idea come from? And, take us from the start to where you are now and what you're doing.
Yeah, so I hit a point and with my symptoms and needing surgery that I saw the cost, which is astronomical. And my head just went to, I need to get this done. So as fast as possible. So just how am I paying for this? Like pulling out a 401k. So I did save up a lot of money for this, knowing how expensive it's going to be. What 0% credit card can I get to put the balance on that and like pay it off over the rest of the year, as fast as I can. And even that, like I was lucky I had money put away. Like I was lucky I could pull out of my 401k and like figure out paying the taxes on it later. And I was lucky I could qualify for a 0% credit card to put the balance on that. Like that's not even an option for a lot of other women too. And I really started thinking about this after my own surgery and talking about it online and just in conversations and having women reach out from high school, college, like coming out of the woodwork, saying, I've been dealing with this. I don't know what to do. Who should I go to? What do I, how do I get this surgery that's actually going to help? And look at not just referring to like my doctor, but also others, thinking like, okay, maybe my doctor's charging like a little bit more. But were some other options for this? Like there has to be more options. And I just didn't look into them because I was so determined to just get the surgery at that point and was able to figure it out. So I started calling up all these other top excision specialists in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area. And it seemed to be a consistent pattern. Some were expensive than others. But it seemed very consistent that it was, no matter what, it was astronomical and inaccessible. So that's why I ended up starting my foundation, Endo Excision For All, after reaching out to a bunch of other foundations in the New York area, just across the country, Texas, California, you name it, I reached out. And that they're all great for research and community support. But that was the one missing puzzle piece, was who is helping women pay for excision surgery. And I do want to mention all these other, majority of these foundations do also work like policy change wise, like advocating for insurance coverage to chime in for excision. But that's a long process. So in the meantime, who is helping women access this? So that's why I started Endo Excision For All. But the main issue with the insurance, and this is something too that I was trying to understand and have spent the last year really diving into. And this is my understanding of it now. So I hope somebody listens to this and it isn't 100%, or things change, obviously. And there's so many moving parts. But this is my understanding of it, is that insurance coverage for excision, there technically is a code, a CPT code, 58662, and it covers ablation and excision under that same code. However, excision specialists, to be trained as that, like the ones that are out of network, they have to do an extra fellowship, which is 2 to 2.5 years after kind of like OBGYN school. So that's extra time. And that's so that they can learn all this expertise, because in OB-GYN medical school, there's not enough time to cover excision. So they can cover ablation because it's a lot simpler, but excision, maybe it's touched on, but there's not enough time for the expertise. It is one of the most complex surgeries ever. And that's a quote from like every excision specialist. And even gynecologists agree with that. The ones that, acknowledge that they don't want to touch a patient because they don't have that capability. But medical schools, ultimately, they just don't adequately teach excision for those reasons. And on top of that too, even with ablation, you're burning it. So you're not excising it to then send it to pathology and have that proof. So who knows if they're even properly identifying endometriosis lesions. So that's why with most women, with ablation surgery, it gets left behind, or they don't know the other organs to look at. They're just going around the uterus and the ovaries and fallopian tubes, and that's it, which makes sense. They're gynecologists. They shouldn't be going around. The bladder should be a urogynecologist. The colon and rectum needs to be a gastro, or like I said, an excision specialist who's trained on all these parts of the body. Thoracic, that's a whole other separate conversation. Sciatic, that's a whole other separate conversation. And a gynecologist can't touch any of those areas, let alone whether it's ablation or excision. But there's not enough time to teach them ablation of those areas, let alone excision of all those areas. So that's where the whole medical school training comes in. But I've definitely digressed a little bit. So let me get back to the point. There's a CPT code for ablation excision, that 58662. But when it comes to the payout to the providers, they are paid out they're using that code, right? So whether it's ablation or excision, they're getting paid out the same amount of money, which is not a lot. So when a gynecologist performs an ablation, they get their payout, say it's $100 from insurance. It doesn't really matter that much to them because it's not their bread and butter doing ablations. They are delivering babies. They are doing annual pap smears and everything else that comes with being a gynecologist. That's where they make their money. Where excision specialists, to be as knowledgeable as they are and expert on it, this is all they're doing. So they can't make enough money to keep a practice open, let alone pay malpractice insurance off of what they're getting payouts from insurance on that CPT code 58662. So they have to, it forces them out of network. So there needs to be, part of our mission with the policy change aspect is devaluing that 58662, so that it devalues ablation and fully covers excision and pays out more from insurance companies to these doctors so that they can take insurance. And then insurance is paying the brunt of the surgery, and the patients are paying a less amount.
Yeah, and the way that I understand it too from talking to these doctors is, an ablation might be like a 30-minute to an hour procedure where your procedure, as an example, right? All of that volume of hours, that could be almost a full day. You're seeing maybe one or two patients versus, like you said, a standard OBGYN, if they're doing surgery, they're probably seeing 7 patients or 8 patients in a day. And, the whole thing is just very challenging. There's just so many layers that go into this.
Yeah, no, thank you for pointing that out. Yes, so the fact that they can do more ablations in a day, where excision specialists, like you said, it could take on average, some surgeries can be 3 hours, but they mostly, by the time patients are getting diagnosed, it's going to be 6 hours to even 12 hours. That's 12 hours like for one surgery, and their payout's $100. Like that's estimated. That's crazy. That's recognized as the same adequate amount of payouts for those two types of surgical techniques. But also with the ablation surgery, the recurrence rates. So the recurrence rates on average for ablation, you're a repeat customer, where excision, like we were talking about before, it's not for life. You might not be good for life, but hopefully, ideally, on average, it is way more significant time period of space between surgical intervention when you're getting excision surgery versus an ablation where you're more of a repeat customer.
Yeah, 100%. So what does the foundation do? How does it work? What are you working on?
So the first thing being fundraising to help women pay for their surgery. So since starting the website and social media has been huge for like reaching the endo community. So our main focus has been, like I said, we got our 501c3 in June of last year. So it is not remotely a year. So fundraising wise, like there's still, all those components of setting up a 501c3 to have fundraising events. You need a tech exemption, all this stuff. So we didn't even get those documentations until like December. So we haven't had like the ability to have like a full-fledged event to like really bring in a lot of money. So we've been doing a lot of smaller fundraisers, like webinars and things like that. As the spring's happening now, want to do some more like outdoor events where it's like yoga or wellness and have it be more donation based. So like, especially because a lot of our community is patients within the first year, and that's the community building focus, is providing education on excision versus ablation and the probable outcomes of both, but then fundraising too. So any small donation helps. They all add up, which we saw greatly through the webinars that we've been doing with top excision specialists around the country, not just New York, but also California, and we're trying to reach out into other states, but also providing a excision specialist directory. So ultimately, like, we're not directly referring to anybody, but we want to have a directory of patient vetted surgeons. So part of our community building with patients is finding out who they went to for excision surgery, their experience, if it was positive, all the positives, all the negatives, sometimes mixed, and just getting a patient vetted directory. And then ideally building that out so that people can contact patients directly who have had experiences with specific surgeons, but just making sure we are not directly like working with any excision specialists and like funneling patients there. But the whole idea being patient vetted. These are patient experiences for excision. Because that is something too that, as I'm looking at all these doctors around the country, is reading their reviews, and whether they're practicing gynecologist or focused on endo excision, you read a review and you get a patient's perspective, but you don't get everything in that. Like you don't know if you got ablation or excision. You don't know what parts of the body it was on. You don't know how old they are. You don't know what they have tried in the past. You don't know if they had excision, even if it's a comment on an excision specialist's review online on, say, Google reviews. You don't know if they had a couple ablations beforehand. You don't get all that. So that's what we're trying to build out an excision directory that's patient vetted, where you get that full story from the reviews that are going to be under each doctor.
That's fantastic. One of the things I always wanted to do, maybe you guys can do this, is have almost like a mentor program, like for someone who maybe has been in Michigan, like I live in Michigan, and maybe there's some patients that are here that just need like a mentor that can help them and be in their area, go meet for coffee, things like that. I know there's a lot of Facebook groups, but a lot of people, I just personally, like, I don't use Facebook anymore, you know? And so how do we pair people up without having to go on social media too, is something that I always was wishing for in the community.
There's so someone that I'm very close with the founder. It's called My Advo. So their website is Hello My Advo. So they have a community, and that's like their premise is building a peer advocate.
Oh, good.
Basically like a matchup group, but the support group, and it's in WhatsApp. So people can join that through their website and join the WhatsApp and, you know, just meet women from, I mean, it is started in New York, so a lot of the women are in that area, but there are a lot of women from other states as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It's
Okay, good. Yeah, it's a great start. There's so many good things happening in the endo space. I do feel very good. There's a lot of people doing a lot of great work, and it is really refreshing to see, even though, you know, some of the patients I unfortunately talk to are still told the same thing I was told 25 years ago, but we're getting there. I mean, there's a lot more advocacy and awareness, and especially from people like you that just, you know, you're doing this hard work for people in the community, and it's really amazing.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how many, like I said, it hasn't been a year. So like even the website, like I just built that out like myself, and I'm not a professional website. Like I just wanted something. I'm gonna build that out over time. And just the amount of women that have reached out and found and like are applying for help with costs and really need it. Like we're not getting someone who, you know, lives in a wealthy area and hasn't just like looking for a free payout. Like these are women that really, really need it. So we definitely, fundraising is top of the priority to help those women, but it's just it's sad how many women need it, but it's also very encouraging of how they're finding proper resources, like our foundation and other foundations, and just other support groups to help navigate that process.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I have met some patients who did like also a GoFundMe. Like if you really need help now, that's also another way to try and get some fundraising going for yourself personally. And I did have someone on the show that also said they were able to go to the hospital and almost ask for a grant. So just some other tips for people. I hadn't heard that before, but some hospitals are nonprofits and they have abilities to do a grant. So something else to just look into. But obviously, Nicole is the one on the show right now and working towards this, you know, hopefully helping a lot of patients get excision surgery and policy change, which will ultimately be such a huge help if we can get, like you said, those codes updated.
No, that's a great resource to go to the hospitals, because we have on our website like a under resources some financial support resources. But even like if that's like a first step is like go to the hospital, like we're trying to figure out step by steps of here are other outlets to get financial help, whether it's insurance companies or like you said, hospitals, or just different outlets like that, so that the money we raise can be the best spread out amongst all the women that are applying. So trying to get money from other resources as well is super helpful.
And there's some endo excision doctors that will do a couple pro bono cases a year. And so that's always something to ask for as well. And maybe, Nicole, that'll be something that'll be listed on your site eventually soon too. But there are ways. I honestly, this is something that when I saw that you were doing this, it just brought me so much joy, because this is something that I worry about for people, because I know when I had my first excision surgery, like you said, you had to pull out of your 401k. I paid it off over, I don't know, 8 or 9 years. They allowed me to do a payment program, thank goodness. But otherwise I wouldn't have been able to have the surgery. And it was a life-changing surgery for me. It really was.
And exactly like what we were talking about before, how it's for life and it's not a permanent fix, but that doesn't mean it's not life-changing.
Correct. Yeah. That's a beautiful quote right there. Well, good. Well, Nicole, is there anything we didn't talk about that you want to add? How can patients find you or listeners find you?
Yeah, our website is endoexcisionforall.org. We are on Instagram, Facebook. You can find all our social links on the website. Also apply for help with coverage on our website. See any events that we have going on. And just see we have a bunch of patient resources that we cite all the sources for the information that we're providing. But yeah, we're trying to grow out our community building, fundraise obviously to help these women pay for surgeries, and fight for the policy change. We're going to be in DC on Tuesday. There is a congressional hearing for CMS reimbursement. And a lot of people think, like, what does CMS reimbursement have to do with endometriosis? But it has a lot to do with it. A lot of the CMS coding, insurance companies base a lot of their coding systems, or their payout symptoms and reimbursement rates based off of Medicare tables. So there's a lot to work with there. So we'll be there and networking and seeing what next steps look like in terms of policy.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of this. I really appreciate it. And don't worry, everyone, I will link everything in the show notes so you don't have to write it down if you're driving or something like that, listening to the show. Everything will be linked in the show notes. And Nicole, just really appreciate all of your hard work. Seriously, thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you for having me and shedding more light on this.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening. Please, if you would, provide us with a 5-star review if you enjoyed the show. It really helps us get great guests like Nicole and more reach out there so we can just get more awareness around endometriosis. I hope everyone's feeling okay today. Take care of yourselves. Thanks for listening.